Snow fell softly over Rosewood Lane the night Elena Voss arrived at the house. Not the beautiful kind of snow people photograph beneath Christmas lights, but the heavy, silent kind that buried sound beneath layers of white and made the entire world feel abandoned. Her windshield wipers moved slowly against the storm as she guided the black company van through the empty suburban streets. The neighborhood looked wealthy in the cold, detached way. Rich neighborhoods often did at night. Large homes, iron fences, perfect lawns now hidden beneath snowdrifts and windows, glowing faintly behind expensive curtains. Everything looked peaceful. That was usually how death looked from the outside. Elena lit a cigarette without taking her eyes off the road. The flame illuminated her face briefly inside the darkness of the van. Sharp cheekbones, pale skin, tired gray eyes that no longer reacted much to anything. At 38 years old, Elena had spent nearly a decade cleaning what other people could not bear to look at. Murders, suicides, bodies left undiscovered too long. People called her company after the police left, and the grieving families realized blood remained long after prayers ended. Elena had once cried during her first cleanup job. Now she mostly worried about stains reaching floorboards. That frightened people sometimes. But numbness was not cruelty. It was survival. The GPS screen blinked weakly beside her. Rosewood Lane, final house on left. Elena exhaled smoke slowly through her nose. The dispatcher had sounded strange on the phone earlier. Too rushed, too quiet, no body recovered, he had said. That was unusual. If there was no body, there usually wasn't a cleanup. Still, the pay was triple the normal amount, and Elena had stopped asking unnecessary questions years ago. The house finally appeared through the snowfall. Rosewood Lane House stood at the very end of the street, isolated slightly farther back than the neighboring homes. Tall black windows overlooked the frozen yard, while snow collected heavily across the roof and porch steps. The place looked elegant, European almost, like something old hidden beneath something modern. Elena parked near the curb and turned off the engine. Silence immediately swallowed the world. No passing cars, no voices, only snow, falling endlessly beneath the pale glow of streetlights. For a moment, Elena simply sat there smoking and staring at the house. Something about it unsettled her. Not fear exactly. Instinct. Like arriving at a church moments after a funeral ended, the sadness still lingered in the air. She finally stepped out into the cold. Snow crunched beneath her boots as she retrieved her equipment bags from the van. Chemical cleaners, masks, gloves, biohazard containers, the tools of her profession. The front door was unlocked. Another bad sign. Elena pushed it open carefully. Warm air greeted her immediately. Too warm. The smell inside the house stopped her for a second. Not blood, not decay. Food. Freshly cooked food. A dining table sat in the next room beneath a chandelier, still covered with untouched dinner plates and half-filled wine glasses. Steam no longer rose from the food, but it looked recent enough that someone should still have been sitting there. Elena frowned. Hello. No answer. Only silence. She stepped farther inside and closed the door behind her. The house was immaculate. Dark wooden floors gleamed beneath soft yellow lights. Expensive paintings hung perfectly straight along the walls. A marble staircase curved upward toward the second floor. Nothing looked disturbed. No police tape. No signs of violence. No blood. But something felt wrong. Terribly wrong. Elena set down her equipment bags near the entrance and slowly walked into the dining room. 4 plates, 4 glasses. A family dinner interrupted halfway through. One chair had fallen backward slightly, as though someone stood up too quickly. She touched the wine glass nearest her. Still cold, not frozen, recent. Her eyes drifted toward the hallway beyond the kitchen. Darkness waited there. Then a television upstairs burst into static. Elena looked up immediately. The sound echoed faintly through the house, before fading again into silence. Great, she muttered. Probably a faulty signal. Still, her shoulders tightened slightly. Elena moved through the first floor, carefully inspecting rooms the way she always did before beginning cleanup work. The living room looked untouched, except for one strange detail. Every family photograph in the room had been turned face down. Every single one. Elena stopped beside the fireplace. That was never random. People did strange things after trauma, especially survivors. She reached down and lifted one photograph upright. A family smiled back at her. Father, mother, and a little girl around 8 years old sitting between them. The child's face had been violently scratched out, deep lines carved directly across the image. Elena stared at it quietly. Something about destroyed photographs always disturbed her more than blood. Blood happened quickly, but this required emotion, hatred, fear, grief. She carefully placed the photograph back down. The television upstairs crackled again. This time it stayed on longer. Static hissed faintly through the ceiling. Elena sighed heavily and grabbed a flashlight from her bag. Let's get this over with. The staircase groaned beneath her boots as she climbed toward the second floor. The air felt colder upstairs. Not physically colder, perhaps. Emotionally colder. The hallway lights flickered softly above her. Several bedroom doors stood open along the corridor. Most rooms appeared untouched. Perfect beds, folded clothes, stillness. Then she heard it. Piano music. Slow, childlike. Soft enough that she almost thought she imagined it. Elena froze. The melody drifted from the final room at the end of the hallway. A simple tune, uneven. Like small hands learning the keys for the first time. The music stopped suddenly. Silence followed. Elena tightened her grip on the flashlight and walked toward the room. The door stood slightly open. Inside waited a child's bedroom. Pink wallpaper, bookshelves, stuffed animals, and against the far wall, a black upright piano. The piano bench moved gently, back and forth, as though someone had stood up only moments earlier. Elena stepped into the room slowly. Her flashlight moved across the floor. No footprints. No person. Nothing. Yet the final piano key still trembled faintly. Elena stared at it for a long moment. Then she noticed the journal beneath the piano bench. Small, blue, covered with stars. A child's diary. Elena hesitated before picking it up. Normally, she avoided personal belongings during jobs. It helped to maintain distance. But the silence inside that room felt unbearable somehow. She opened the journal carefully. Most pages contained ordinary childish things. Drawings, spelling mistakes, mentions of school, piano lessons, a dog named Oliver. Then the handwriting changed. Messier, uneven, scared. Mom says we have to stay quiet now. Another page. Dad keeps looking at the basement door. Another. I heard it walking last night. Elena felt something cold move slowly through her chest. The final page had been written much harder than the others, the pen pressing so deeply it nearly tore through the paper. Mom says if I stay quiet, the thing downstairs won't hear me. Elena stared at the sentence. The house creaked softly around her. Then came a sound from below. Footsteps. Slow, heavy footsteps. Walking across the first floor. Elena's head snapped toward the bedroom door. The footsteps continued. One step at a time. Not hurried. Not hiding. Someone was downstairs. Elena immediately reached for her phone. No signal. Of course. The footsteps stopped directly beneath the bedroom. Silence returned. Then, from somewhere deep below the house, came the sound of a door slowly opening. The thing downstairs. Elena Voss stood motionless in the child's bedroom, the little blue journal trembling slightly in her hands. Below her, somewhere deep inside the house, a door had opened. The sound still lingered faintly through the floorboards. Slow, heavy, wood dragging against wood. Then silence returned. The kind of silence that makes human beings suddenly aware of their own breathing. Elena slowly closed the journal. For the first time in years, she realized her heart was beating too fast. She hated that feeling. Fear complicated work, and Elena's work required precision, control, distance. Still, the sentence written in the journal would not leave her mind. Mom says if I stay quiet, the thing downstairs won't hear me. Children imagine monsters all the time. Normally, she would have dismissed it immediately. But nothing about Rosewood Lane House felt normal anymore. The piano bench beside her creaked softly. Elena looked toward it immediately. The bench moved slightly backward on its own. Just an inch. As though invisible knees had pushed away from the piano. Elena's fingers tightened around the flashlight. Enough, she whispered. Her own voice sounded weak in the room. That irritated her more than the fear itself. She stepped toward the doorway and listened carefully. Nothing upstairs, nothing below. Then, a child laughed softly somewhere down the hallway. Elena froze. The sound had been brief. Not malicious, not loud, Just the quick laugh of a little girl hearing something amusing. But there should have been nobody inside the house. The police had cleared it hours earlier. Elena stepped into the hallway slowly. The lights flickered overhead. One of the bedroom doors farther down the corridor now stood open. She was certain it had been closed earlier. The laughter came again, this time from inside that room. Elena swallowed once and walked toward it. The floorboards groaned beneath her boots. Her flashlight beam cut through darkness until it reached the room at the end of the hall. Bathroom. Empty. The mirror above the sink reflected pale light back toward her. For one brief second, Elena thought she saw movement behind her reflection. A small shape standing in the hallway. She turned instantly. Nothing. Only the empty corridor stretching behind her. Snow hissed softly against the windows downstairs. Elena looked back toward the mirror. Written across the glass in tiny wet letters were 4 words. "Did you find her?" Elena stepped backwards so quickly her shoulder hit the wall. The words began sliding downward slowly like tears. "No," she whispered. She approached the mirror carefully. Condensation. That was all. Someone had written on the glass before the room cooled. Logical, explainable. Still, something about the handwriting disturbed her deeply. It looked rushed, shaking, desperate. Elena wiped the words away with the sleeve of her jacket. Then the television upstairs crackled again. Static exploded somewhere behind her. The sound came from the parents' bedroom across the hall. Elena turned toward it slowly. The television inside the room glowed white against darkness. She entered cautiously. The bedroom was enormous. Elegant. But the bed looked untouched, as though nobody had slept there in days. Static hissed loudly from the television. Then the image flickered. Elena stopped breathing for a second. The television was displaying the first floor of the house. Live footage. Security cameras. The dining room. The staircase. The kitchen. And standing in the kitchen was a little girl. Elena stared at the screen. 8 years old, perhaps. Long blonde hair. White nightgown. The child stood completely still beside the dining table. Watching the camera, Elena spun toward the bedroom doorway, immediately. The hallway outside remained empty. When she looked back at the television, the girl was closer now, standing at the bottom of the staircase. Her face hidden beneath strands of pale hair. The screen distorted violently with static. Then, the image disappeared completely. Elena rushed toward the television. No signal, no camera indicator, nothing connected, just static. Her pulse hammered painfully inside her throat now. She had seen terrible things before. Bodies melted into mattresses during summer heat. Blood dried black against nursery walls. Families screaming at each other while coroners wheeled someone away beneath a sheet. But this felt different. This felt personal somehow. The room suddenly became colder. Not slightly colder, violently colder. Elena's breath appeared faintly in the air. Then she heard it. A woman crying. Soft, broken, coming from somewhere below the bedroom floor. Elena closed her eyes briefly. "This house is getting into your head," she muttered. That happened sometimes after long night shifts. Exhaustion mixed with silence. Still, she could not ignore the crying. It sounded real. Human. Elena slowly left the bedroom and walked back toward the staircase. The crying grew louder downstairs. As she descended, the house seemed darker than before. Shadows stretched strangely along the walls. The lights flickered with faint electrical buzzing. Halfway down the staircase, Elena stopped. The dining room had changed. One of the chairs now faced directly toward the stairs. She was certain it had not been positioned that way earlier. On the table sat a bowl of soup still releasing faint steam. Impossible. Elena descended the remaining steps carefully. The crying had stopped now. Complete silence filled the first floor again. Then came another sound. A piano key. One single note. Upstairs. Elena whipped around toward the staircase. No one there. But she realized something horrifying then. The piano room was directly above the dining room, which meant whatever had played the note had done it while she was downstairs. Moving above her, following her, the hallway near the kitchen seemed darker than before. The basement door stood slightly open now. Elena stared at it. A thin line of darkness stretched between the door and frame like an open mouth. Cold air drifted upward from below. The smell reached her seconds later. Wet earth. Rot. Something old. Something hidden too long. Elena approached slowly. Every instinct told her not to. But another part of her, the professional part that had survived years around death, needed answers more than safety. She pushed the basement door open wider. Dark stairs disappeared downward into blackness. The crying returned immediately. Closer now. A woman sobbing quietly beneath the house. Elena shined her flashlight downward. Concrete walls. Old wooden stairs. Nothing else visible. Then the flashlight beam caught something near the bottom step. Tiny, muddy footprints. Child-sized. Leading deeper into the basement. Elena's mouth went dry. The crying stopped suddenly. Then a child whispered from below. Mommy said not to make noise. Elena nearly stumbled backward. "Who's down there?" she shouted. No answer. Only silence. Then came a slow dragging sound from the darkness below, like something heavy being pulled across concrete. Elena should have left. Any sane person would have. But Elena had spent too many years around grief to believe in sanity anymore. Instead, she descended the stairs, one step at a time. The basement smelled worse with every movement downward. Mold, standing water, and beneath it, something metallic, the smell of old blood. Her flashlight swept slowly across the basement floor. Storage shelves, broken furniture, plastic sheets hanging from the ceiling. Then the beam stopped. Against the far wall stood dozens of family photographs. Hundreds, perhaps, all facing outward. Every single photograph showed the same little girl from upstairs, and in every photograph, her face had been scratched out. Elena stared in horror. Then she noticed something else. In the center of the room sat a small wooden chair, facing the darkness beyond the flashlight beam, as though someone had been sitting there watching. The dragging sound came again, closer now. Elena slowly moved the flashlight farther right, and saw the hand. Pale fingers resting just beyond the edge of light, attached to something crouching in the darkness, not moving, not breathing, waiting. The child's voice whispered again from somewhere behind Elena now. "If it hears you, it comes upstairs." The thing in the house, Elena Voss, did not scream. Years of standing beside death had burned that instinct out of her long ago. But as she stared into the basement darkness, at the pale hand resting just beyond the flashlight beam, something colder than fear spread slowly through her chest. Recognition, not of a face, not of a person, but of grief. The same grief she had spent years cleaning from walls and carpets and ceilings while pretending none of it touched her. The child's voice whispered again behind her. "If it hears you, it comes upstairs." Elena turned sharply. No one stood behind her, only the basement stairs disappearing upward into dim yellow light. When she looked back toward the hand, it was gone. The darkness beyond the flashlight remained empty, but the wooden chair in the center of the basement now faced her directly. Slowly, softly, it rocked once on its legs. Creak. Elena backed away instinctively. The flashlight trembled slightly in her grip. "Who's down here?" she demanded. Silence answered. Then somewhere above the basement ceiling, the piano began playing again. Slow, broken, childlike notes drifting through the house. Elena looked upward. The music sounded closer now, almost directly above her head. But she knew the piano upstairs sat untouched in the little girl's bedroom, which meant something moved suddenly in the darkness behind the hanging plastic sheets. A shape, tall, too thin. Elena swung the flashlight toward it instantly. The beam illuminated only translucent plastic swaying gently, but behind the plastic, she could see movement. Someone standing there, watching. The flashlight flickered once, then went out completely. Darkness swallowed the basement. Elena inhaled sharply. Damn it. Her pulse hammered painfully inside her ears as she struck the flashlight against her palm. Nothing. The piano upstairs stopped. Complete silence followed. Then came breathing. Not her breathing. Another breath. Slow, wet, standing somewhere very close. Elena froze. The smell reached her seconds later. Rotting meat. Wet soil. And underneath it all, bleach. The smell of cleanup chemicals. The flashlight suddenly flickered back on. The plastic sheets ahead moved gently. No one visible behind them now, but written across the nearest hanging sheet in dripping black letters were the words, "Did you find them?" Yet Elena stared at the message in horror. Then the child laughed softly upstairs. The sound snapped something inside her. She turned and hurried toward the basement stairs, no longer caring how irrational it looked. Every instinct screamed at her to leave the house immediately. She reached the kitchen. The house had changed again. The dining table was gone. The chairs were gone. The room now stood completely empty, except for one thing. A little girl sat alone on the floor near the hallway. Blonde hair, white dress, head lowered. Elena stopped moving. The girl looked impossibly real. Not translucent, not ghostly. Just a child sitting silently inside a cold house. "Elena," the girl whispered. Elena's stomach dropped. "How do you know my name?" The child slowly lifted her head. Her face had been scratched away. Not wounded. Erased, like the photographs upstairs. Elena stepped backward immediately. The girl tilted her head slightly. "Mom couldn't find me either." The lights flickered violently. Then every hallway light went dark at once. Only the living room remained illuminated, now pale yellow lights spilling across the floorboards like a path. The little girl was gone. Elena stood alone in silence. Then she heard a woman crying upstairs. Not soft crying this time. Violent sobbing. The kind of sound people make when something inside them finally breaks forever. Against every rational instinct, Elena climbed the staircase again. The crying led her toward the parents' bedroom. The door stood open now. Inside, the television flickered with static while a woman sat on the edge of the bed with her back facing the doorway. Long dark hair. Thin shoulders, trembling softly. Elena stopped near the entrance. "Ma'am." The crying stopped immediately. The woman did not turn around. Instead, she whispered. She was hiding downstairs. Elena's mouth went dry. The woman's voice sounded exhausted beyond human limits. "I told her to stay quiet," she continued softly. "I told her not to come upstairs, no matter what she heard." The television screen crackled. A home video appeared. The same family from the photograph smiled into the camera while the little girl played piano in the background. Happy, ordinary, alive. Then the footage changed abruptly. Nighttime, shaky camera movement, the father yelling somewhere off screen, the mother crying, the little girl hiding beneath the piano bench, and then a loud banging sound from downstairs. The mother on the bed whispered, "It learned our voices first." Elena stared at the screen. The footage became more frantic, doors slamming, furniture moving, the father shouting, "Get her upstairs," the little girl crying. Then the camera pointed briefly toward the basement door. Something stood there in darkness. Tall. Wrong. Its body bent slightly too far forward. Its arms hanging too long. The footage cut to static. Elena slowly looked toward the woman sitting on the bed. What happened here? The woman finally turned around. Elena nearly stumbled backward. The woman's face had been torn apart by grief. Not physically. Emotionally. Eyes hollow from sleeplessness. Skin pale and thin. Like someone who had already died weeks earlier, but continued moving anyway. "We couldn't leave the house," the woman whispered. "It followed us upstairs every night." Tears slid slowly down her cheeks. It sounded like family members at first. My husband. My daughter. Sometimes me. The room darkened slightly. The television hissed louder. The woman looked toward Elena. "It likes lonely people." Those words struck Elena harder than she expected, because loneliness had defined her life for years now. Not dramatic loneliness. Not visible loneliness. The quiet kind. The kind hidden beneath routines and cigarettes and long night shifts. The kind that waited beside her every morning in her empty apartment. The woman whispered, "It knows when grief leaves a door open." The bedroom door slammed shut behind Elena. The television burst into static. And suddenly the crying woman vanished from the bed. Elena spun around wildly. The room stood empty. Then came the sound from beneath the bed. Breathing. Slow. Wet. Something moving underneath. Elena backed away carefully. The breathing became heavier. Then a child whispered from beneath the mattress, "Mommy says it wears our voices now." The bed shifted violently. Elena ran. She tore the bedroom door open and sprinted into the hallway as something slammed hard against the floor inside the room behind her. The entire house groaned around her. Piano music exploded downstairs. Wild now. Violent keys crashing without rhythm. Children laughing echoed through the vents. Women crying inside the walls. Elena stumbled toward the staircase and stopped. At the bottom stood the little girl again. This time she held a stuffed rabbit against her chest, her scratched-out face tilted upward slowly. "It found you too." The hallway lights burst one by one. Darkness rushed closer. The child pointed toward the living room. Elena turned, and finally saw it clearly. The thing from the basement stood near the fireplace, tall enough that its head nearly touched the ceiling. Its body looked almost human beneath layers of darkness, moving like wet cloth, but its limbs bent incorrectly. Its arms dragged too long against the floor, and its face kept changing. The grieving mother, the little girl, the father, then strangers, then Elena herself. The creature smiled using her own face. Elena could not breathe. The thing stepped forward slowly. The house lights dimmed around it, and suddenly Elena understood the truth. There had never been a murder here. No killer, no intruder. The family had destroyed itself trying to survive whatever lived beneath the house. The creature fed on sorrow, isolation, grief left untreated until it became something alive. That was why the photographs had been scratched out. The family had stopped recognizing themselves. The thing took another step closer. Elena backed toward the front door blindly. The little girl whispered one final sentence. "Mom says if you leave before sunrise, it can still hear you." The creature opened its mouth, and every grieving voice inside the house screamed at once. Elena ran. She slammed through the front door into the snowstorm, nearly falling down the frozen porch steps. Wind struck her face violently as she sprinted toward the van. Behind her, the piano played wildly inside the house. The front windows glowed yellow against falling snow, and standing upstairs in the child's bedroom window was the little girl, watching silently. Elena drove through the storm until sunrise stained the horizon pale gray. She never returned to Rosewood Lane, but afterward, something changed inside her. She stopped working night shifts, stopped smoking, stopped pretending death left no marks behind, because some stains were not made from blood. And months later, while cleaning an abandoned apartment alone just after midnight, Elena heard a child humming softly in the next room. The same piano melody from Rosewood Lane. When she turned toward the dark hallway, she saw muddy, child-sized footprints leading into the shadows. And somewhere far away in the building, something wearing her voice whispered Elena,